Well, all right. Before we get started, I thought maybe you could help remind me what the sun looks like.
Are you not getting any?
Oh, I had a sliver yesterday.
Oh, man.
Man, it has
Sunday.
been gray blanket city.
Oh, man. Sunday reminded me, at least here, Sunday reminded me of somewhere in the early summer of 21, where there wasn't like an official end to this stay-at-home shelter-in-place deal with COVID. And everybody just emerged from their house like you see ants stepping, like do when you step on an anthill. You walked outside. Every single person here was outside.
Oh, yeah?
Everybody. Oh, my God. It was not a cloud in the sky. It was like mid-40. It was 45 degrees, but it felt like 90. I was in shorts and a hoodie. I was outside doing yard work. People were walking their dogs, going out for runs. I saw people on their bikes. Unbelievable. And we haven't had a cloud since. And it's unreal the difference it makes in your mood. Because I'll just be honest. That 2-week stretch with doom and gloom, like cloudiness and grayness and rain. And the only day it was sunny, it was like -15. No grass because it was all covered in snow. It was getting to me. I was like, this is just this hurts. This is not what people are made to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Maybe if you live in Seattle, but still, it's just not, I didn't sign up for this.
No.
So it has been it just goes to show you like how much of a difference the sunlight, the vitamin D has on everyone's. People are in a better mood. They're more optimistic. But yeah, it was just because I'm of the belief that I would take 15 degrees and sunny over 35 or 40 and gray skies and rain. Yeah, give me sunshine all day long, and we've got it. And it's I'm not trying to rub it in, but because I'll pay the price come June when it's 100 degrees here and you're in like 65 degrees and perfect weather with no humidity. I'll get it back then, but it's nice. It's nice to see the sun. It was weird to see it in the sky because I was like, what is that thing in the sky that is bright? I haven't seen it in like a month.
Yeah, I've just been trying to look at it as a mental toughness exercise, which is okay. I finally did get out. I've been doing a lot of inside work, but I did get out. We got out and ran on the lake, ice running. It's pretty cool with my strap-on run shoes, snowshoes. And, yeah, that was cool. But it does, I mean, just even being out, even when the sun wasn't out, just being outside, it was just, I could tell it had a different physiological effect on my being.
Yeah. It's huge for the mood.
Huge for the mood.
But yeah, it's fantastic. And hope you're getting sunshine and warm weather or warmer weather and just a little bit of respite from the nastiness of how it's been the last 2 weeks. It's January 30th. Man, almost finished up with the first month of the year, 2024. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron podcast, and this is episode 746.
Yeah, it is. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I hope so. We're going to talk a lot about cycling today.
Cycling, good for me.
It's been a bit. We usually talk about swimming, talk a lot about running. Then we get a lot of requests for cycling. So we're going to talk about that today. The sessions, the training, the focus you should have, and maybe that you aren't having that you can kind of weave in your training. Some things that you and I are aware of as coaches that we see with athletes and how we program. And a lot of times when we work with newer athletes, things that we can tell that they've avoided in the past or have just flat out never done before. But before we get into that today, if it's your first time tuning in today, welcome. We appreciate your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the Triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Tons of vibes. We appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also a lot of race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level athletes looking to their very first 5K or sprint triathlon, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to world championships and everyone in between, and from all over the globe. And we'll use the feedback loop we have with them and training peaks, emails, text messages, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also like to utilize our Facebook group. You can search that, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question. We'll let you right in. Awesome people, fantastic community, solid resource. In the last few weeks, we've been announcing our new coaches. We have 10 new coaches coming on board from all across the U.S. Lots of males, lots of females, and their bios are in there. So if you're looking for different flavor, different personality, but same C26 approach, check it out. A lot of awesome people excited to announce them and read their bios, and we spent a lot of time together. You'll be in good hands with them. But it's a great place in there. In general, we go in there about once a month, or at least around about there, and do a little bit of a Q&A, take the pulse of the community, answer questions as best we can, and that is it. We have no sponsors and we have no ads, but we do have an agenda, and that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah, we do. Now, speaking of the new coaches, the 2024 club program is available on the website, C26 Triathlon.
Launch day.
Put it out there. It's on the homepage. It's also under the drop down under coaching. Check it out. $349. We'll plan out your season for you. Take the stress away. Take the headaches out. Just let you go crush it.
Yeah, I like it. If you want to feel less stale, hop on there and have a little bit of a nice, solid trajectory for the season. And you said it. Take the stress away. Life's stressful enough. It's nice to just wake up and have something planned for you. Take out the guesswork. Yeah, I love that. We've had such a great response to that in the past, and a lot of great results. So check that out on the website, and let Mike know if you have any questions. The topic for today, and I feel like what a lot of people focus on in the winter, I think some people do, very few people focus on their swimming, let's be honest. And that's just because I think very few triathletes focus on swimming in general. And probably the least favorite time to focus on swimming is in the winter, because most people don't like to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. It's freezing cold outside. It's pitch black dark. And let me go and head to the pool and jump in what's more than likely a cold pool. It just doesn't sound that great. Now, some people do. We do that a lot, but a lot of people don't. Some people do a focused run block. We have a lot of people doing that, but because it's the easiest thing to do. And I think this is, outside of when it gets -20, like I just got done complaining about, it's generally the best time of year to go run, right? It's like I always kind of laugh when like I was saying, like everybody comes like swarming out of their house to get back and get out and do run shape when it's like June and it's like 95 degrees, and they wonder why they hate running. It's because you're out of shape and you're trying to get better at running when it's the most oppressive conditions of the year. But like we said, sunshine has such a huge impact on you. It makes you want to get outside and do things, and there's more sunlight. So it's a hard time to do that. So a lot of people do it. But now cycling, a lot of people will focus on indoor cycling. They're not doing a lot of outdoor stuff. If they do, they're doing more fat bike, mountain bike, maybe hop on their road bike, but they're not getting out there unless you live in like California or somewhere on the West Coast, or Arizona, Utah, somewhere like this where you can get outside and do some things. But for a lot of you, you're inside, you're on the trainer, and so I figured today would be a great time to kind of go through some things. Obviously, for our coached athletes, it won't be a surprise, but for self-coached athletes, or athletes working off a plan, or just athletes winging it in general, there are so many different methods when it comes to cycling. There's so much terminology, and I feel like in of all the three of the sports, right? When you talk about a lot of ways to skin a cat, I think swimming and running, there's a few, but they're pretty standard. But cycling, I think, is the one that's argued the most, right? Because you have athletes that want to do a very, very polarized approach, meaning they go hard 15, 20% of the time, and the rest of the time it's zone 1, zone 2. You have athletes who are the belief more of like a pyramidal type training, to where it's a little bit of 2, 3, 4, and 5 when it comes to zones. You got the belief that more volume is better, and most of that should be easy. And then you have the belief that, some people hold, which I think this belief is more one of those like, this is what I like, so I'm going to find a way to make that believable to me. Where it is, it's all about quality. It's all about quality, man. Quality over quantity. Go hard or go home. Like it's be yesterday. They want to get on there because, hey, I'll be honest. Of all the sports, right, where they've kind of, cycling has been gamified. You got all kinds of platforms now with cycling, and they've made, to Zwift's credit, they have made it so fun for athletes to do group rides, to do like, impromptu races, to be part of race series, to do different courses. They've really kind of made this very attractive, but in the same time, and it's like, it also lends itself to really hammering yourself to death. Because if you have like a very high competitive drive or competitive nature, you see somebody like, because it's very similar in the pool. Like I've noticed on Zwift, it's very similar to the pool, to where you're doing your own workout, right? You're alone, and then somebody gets in the lane next to you, and they just happen to be just a little bit faster than you, right? What do? Immediately speed up, right? Because if they were way faster than you, you wouldn't bother. I got nothing. If they're way slower than you, you don't care, right? They're behind you. But if they're just a little bit, or they're the same speed or slightly faster, what are you doing? I'm upping my game. You're not going to beat me, right? Everyone does that. Same goes for if someone like, runs up next to you on the, on the green where your favorite run, you want to hang tight, or you see somebody in the distance that you can catch. What do? You pick up the pace, right? We all have we're all ego-centered in a way and competitive, and we like these things to chase. But what that oftentimes almost always does, right, is take you out of the specific intent of the zone you're trying to stay in. And Zwift is very similar. Even if you're out there just doing like a free ride, somebody comes up next to you, passes you, right? But maybe don't pass you that fast. Like if they come flying by you like freaking, Chris Froome, you're just gonna let them go. But if they're slightly faster than you, what do?
Yep.
I got to hammer it, and I got to hold on tight, and I got to try to hold their wheel, right? Or Zwift will always show you, or a lot of these platforms, Trainer Road, Zwift, Rouvet, Indy Velo is another one that's come out. Everything is like, oh, you were 22 seconds faster than your last lap, or 2 seconds slower, or if you pick up the pace, you'll meet your best lap. It's all about up in the game and beating your previous stuff. And I think it's great in a lot of ways. It helps people stay engaged. And generally speaking, more cycling is better cycling. But having said that, the biggest trap that I find people fall into when they do indoor training, because let's be honest, no one likes to do a focused bike block where it's 85, 90% easy riding. People get bored stiff, right? Even if they got Netflix or Hulu, whatever it is they want to watch, and just kind of zone out, which is what I do. It's boring, right? So as a coach, you have to kind of manage, how do we entertain them? Or as we like to call it, entertrain. How do we want to entertain them by keeping them engaged, still getting the intent across? And so I see a lot of that, right? They want to go hard all the time. But if a few of the things that I've noticed and that I think everyone should really pay attention to when you're kind of structuring your cycling season is, one, make sure your intensity is dialed in. Don't go by what Training Peaks auto corrects, right? And then make sure your testing format is valid. And then know what you're testing for, right? Because if you're going to use that test, whether you're a person that uses, what are ramp tests at now? 4 minutes? I think they're down to 4 minutes now. If you're using a 4 minute or 8 minute, whatever it is, ramp test, know what you're testing for. Know what your goals are, right? Because again, and we've talked about this before, threshold is one of those things where it is useful, but it doesn't tell you the whole story, right? It doesn't tell you what you're great at within your capacity to push that watt, or maybe even that watt for an hour. And the biggest thing, and where I see a lot of athletes get in trouble, is that they very much overinflate their FTP. They do a session for 20 minutes or a ramp test for 8 minutes to 10 minutes, 12, whatever it is, or 6. They get an FTP, and it's almost always higher. Always. Very overinflated. Well, now instead of doing your mid to high zone 2 work, now you're doing zone 3 work. You're gray zoning it. And you're wondering, so know the intent and know what you're trying to accomplish, and be very, very disciplined in that structure, right? So in my opinion, this time of year is fantastic for, one, trying to accumulate as much volume as you possibly can, easy volume, right? And if you're far away from your race, instead of just totally worrying about what your FTP is, right, your anaerobic threshold, you should be really also focusing on your aerobic threshold and then what your VO2 max is. So we're talking about ceilings here, right? Your aerobic threshold or LT1, as some people might call it, is your aerobic ceiling, right? Your anaerobic threshold is more close to where your FTP is, and VO2 max is just your maximal aerobic output in that ceiling. So it's kind of like two floors, right? You got your, ground floor is your aerobic, then the ceiling of the first floor is your anaerobic threshold, and that ceiling is the VO2 max. So raising that ceiling is always a great thing. And this time of year, I think it's fantastic to do that because you're far enough away from your race. So focusing on VO2 max work is fantastic. The trouble you find with a lot of athletes is that they do these blocks for too long. So easy volume is great. And then if you're far away from a race, I like to start off with a good VO2 max block. One, because most athletes ignore it, because the closer you get into race season, they are so taxing on the body that the whole system is already being taxed, right? From a physiological standpoint, that you don't really want. It's the same VO2 max work on the bike when you're ending the last phase of an Ironman, specifically, not so much a 70.3. But you have to be very, very careful of how much of a hole you're digging, because you're asking so much of your body. Same reason I would never, and you probably won't ever see most people be doing track workouts, even if they do them year round, 6 to 8 weeks before your big Ironman. Why? Because you're asking so much out of your body that's already fairly fatigued, right? Because they're very, 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 very taxing. They're short, from 30 seconds high intensity interval training all the way up to maybe 4 to max 5 minutes. That's a great way to kind of work on your low ceiling and your your lowest floor, your aerobic threshold, and your ceiling of VO2 max. And always start around, I would always start around 30 seconds, 45 seconds a minute, because one of the other big benefits that a lot of athletes ignore is that neuromuscular response you get from super high cadence and muscle fiber engagement that you only get from two things. One, big gear work, which we'll talk about here in a minute, or those really, really fast, you're asking your body to respond very, very quickly. Most athletes totally ignore that because it's like the all day, this is my all day slow day pace. I don't need that, but it's still part of your overall profile, right? You don't ever ignore it in running, right? You want to do strides, you want to do 30 seconds burst. Swimming, you still want to have that extra gear, but in cycling, you see a lot of people ignore that because they think it's too short and it's not beneficial enough, or you're working way too hard above your anaerobic threshold that might also not be as beneficial as doing what everyone loves to do, which is sweet spot work or strictly threshold work.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of good stuff there. When I think about cycling and getting better at it, first thing I think that people can do is just get on their bike 3 days a week right now. A lot of people don't do that. And to me, there's no substitute for getting on the bike. And the second thing I learned, shortly into my journey, was that aerobic threshold place. When you get on there and you're kind of, it's an easy day and you're taking it easy, but finding really where that is and knowing where that is so crucial, because I spend a ton of time getting to that place and really working, zone 2 in a, constructive manner, I guess is the good way to say it, because just getting on there and just sort of spinning around your pedals, super boring, but the aerobic threshold can be kind of intense, for me. And just because it's one of these things I always talk about, is being able to dial in your effort and your pacing in racing, to me, is a critical factor, and understanding what that feels like. And I think a lot of times people will do a lot of easy kind of spinny stuff during training, and they don't really understand what just a little bit up of that feels like for a long period of time. And then it kind of wears them down out on the course, and then you kind of start fading and the whole thing starts going to shit. But then also, for me, I know you're going to talk about big gear, but I always think about, I don't complicate things a lot. I try to keep it pretty simple and ride hard when I have the opportunity. And usually that can be delivered to me on a platter with hills. So I like to just work my hills during training, but also understand what that means to not work hills when you're racing, or you not work them, too hard. So, yeah, I like that, the different ceilings, that easy stuff. But that aerobic threshold place for me is something that I find a lot of people don't necessarily understand how it feels and what that means when you're racing.
You nailed it. I think it's the biggest low-hanging fruit for a large majority of athletes is that, one, you don't even really know your zone two. And like old school, we would just say conversational pace.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people either go too hard, right, or too easy. Like and there's a lot of ways to determine this. You can go in and get, lactate testing and VO2 max testing and metabolic testing. But that's just not, it sounds fancy. It sounds fun to go do it. But one, most people only do it once, never go back. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so they just apply it once and really don't know where to go from there. What I love to do and what we have our athletes do is do what we call an aerobic talk test. So we do kind of a 2-minute ramp, 3-minute ramp. And then you take at the end of each 30, at the last 30 seconds of each 3 minutes, you kind of note where your heart rate is. And we do, again, like a 30 to 40 word paragraph. A lot of people use Pledge of Allegiance, which is what I suggest. I'm a patriot. And find out where you can somewhat, you stop saying it comfortably, right? So what you're doing is you're really truly finding your this huge list of like things to look out for, how to lap it, how to find your heart rate, because that is your ultimate conversation pace. But what you nailed and what so many athletes find is like, this is easy, but it takes a lot of focus to maintain it. And when you think of that, it is that, especially when you're indoor training, you get lazy. You stop pedaling so hard. You get into a scene in the movie, or you get zoned out in your phone, scrolling through Facebook, and you just zone out. And next thing you know, your heart rate's 10 beats lower, and you're pedaling at 55 cadence, and you're sitting up, and you've just had a long 35-minute chat with your mother-in-law via Insta chat or whatever. And you realize you just been like way below. Now, it's not going to hurt you, but it's definitely not going to help you. Because to me, time on the bike is precious. Because it is the most time consuming, volume wise, of the three. And so finding like that true, and it's that's the thing I love so much about conversational pace and aerobic talk testing, finding that kind of aerobic threshold, is it's so easy to retest. Right, as long as your heart rate's pretty much similar, you don't have like these crazy outside stressors making your heart rate 10 beats higher when you wake up in the morning. Do it same time of day and same load, pretty much same sleep. Is you can go in and you can see, in 6 to 8 weeks, my power is up, my heart rate is down, or at the same heart rate I'm producing more power, right? Because that is also a lot of people's like all day race pace, and that's why I think a lot of people find, again, especially those that go out and do group rides, they draft a ton. If you're not, so like for Ironman Texas this last year, it was the first year that I really started doing this aerobic talk test with athletes, because the same with Ironman Florida, Arizona, even like course like Wisconsin, you have to focus and dial in to hold that for a period of time. And it's easy enough to do, but it takes just enough focus and strength to do for a long period of time. And then it's great because you can track your heart rate drift, right? If you're doing a 20-minute interval, let's say your aerobic threshold is between 130 and 135, then you can see like maybe the first time you do it, after 14 minutes, you've got to drop your watts down, drop the resistance down, because your heart rate's climbing over that. But then 4 to 5 weeks later, you make it the whole 20 minutes without having to reduce power. You're becoming more aerobically efficient. And whether you're doing sprint, Olympic, 70.3, full, whatever it is, aerobic efficiency is the name of the game. It's the name of the game. Your ability to be aerobically efficient, right? We're talking about working that entire, to where you're using mostly fat oxidation up to that point. You're not starting and you're not initiating your glycolytic system. You're not burning through carbs and sugars. We want to keep those. The more aerobically efficient you are, the better. And I was listening to a great podcast that Olaf Alexander Budde, the Norwegian coach for Gustav Iden and Christian Blumenfeld. He had this insane VO2 max recording, like one that's the world has never seen. It was that high. And he talked through a lot of things, a lot of the positives, but he also talked about the fact that it was also kind of a drawback. He's like, well, but it was not worrisome, but he basically said it was great to see that, but what we also now have to figure out is we don't want him, because his ceiling is so high, we want to make sure his aerobic ceiling has moved with it, or he's going to be burning through glycogen and carbohydrates way sooner than he would if his VO2 max was lower and his aerobic ceiling was higher. Right? So there's always this give and take. And so if you're looking for a way, again, to make aerobic riding fun and intentional and still feel like you're working, right? Because I think that's what a lot of people want. I just don't feel like I'm working very hard. And you shouldn't feel like you're taxed, right? Or working a ton. So if you're in that boat and you're trying to figure out a way to feel like you're making progress, to track progress, is to do that. It's a great long-term thing to focus on, is that aerobic ceiling, because it is, for most athletes, right? Your aerobic ceiling, that aerobic capacity, your aerobic threshold, that and where your maximum lactate steady state is, so that the point in which you can actually combust lactate while you're producing it, and that's even, right? You're not producing lactate. Those, for most people, are you're the ones you focus on the most. And there's also different ways to go about raising those, right? But it's aerobic threshold, and you brought up so many good points. It's such an important thing to do this time of year, to stay focused, and then it's also just a great thing you can track over the course of the year.
Yeah, and just understanding it, really, when you boil it down, and I'm not the best at this always because it just kind of gets a hold of you, but when you go out for an Ironman race, I'm going to talk about just Ironman because of the distance, but the bike should feel kind of easy based on what you trained at. I mean, and it usually does. Like I'll get out of the water and, for the first 30 miles or 40 miles, and last year was a great example, I felt pretty good, man. I was like, all right, this is good. But what happens is I feel good, and then I start turning it up, and I start turning the screws, and I don't pay attention to really what that aerobic ceiling is. And the next thing you know, I'm kind of burning it out a little bit too hard. And then by the end, it's just like, ugh. So I think a lot of people do that. And by the end, that's why we can't run and whatever. But I was talking to an athlete. It was actually about the swim, but I just read a book by Hicks and Gracie. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, the best ever. It's a phenomenal book. It's called Breathe. But that kind of has got me into that rabbit hole a little bit. I'm not like getting into jiu-jitsu, but I love the mentality of it. And one of the things I just was reading about was this thing called the 4 Ps of jiu-jitsu, and patience, pressure, persistence, and posture. And I just really love that as it translates to cycling too, because in racing certainly, but the one thing I love about, because it's all about balance, it's all about being under control when you're grappling and all that kind of thing, and understanding where you're at. But I just love the patience, but I love the pressure piece of it. And that's what I think about a lot when I'm cycling, is the pressure, the amount of pressure I'm putting on it and bringing through it in the backstroke and all that kind of stuff. And is it there? And that to me is that dialing in that exactness of pressure throughout the pedal stroke, and not too much on the back, you know what I mean? Just the right amounts of pressure. And that's what to me is that aerobic ceiling is kind of there. It's sort of like understanding what that means all the way through it, and then building yourself up, start, like you're saying, starting now for a later season race, and really getting a good grasp of what that is and what that means and what that feels like. And then also just, this posture piece, we've talked about it before, but how, nobody pays a lot of attention to the swim, and then you get out of the swim, and then your arms are tired, and then you start losing that posture on your bike because your arms are tired, and it's tougher to even, for me, it's tougher to stay in aero sometimes. I'm always fidgeting around and everything like that. But like this working your core and your upper body and being a strong cyclist on the top too, I think is overlooked so much. And, it's just like leverage and all these little things like that. You can perform better and hold that pressure better if you're stronger up top. And I just find that fascinating. the little thing about the pedals, because like you said it, man, is people, we get on the trainer and the next thing you know, we're watching Netflix, and the next thing you know, we're not even really pedaling anymore because we're caught into a scene or something like that. And that's my biggest thing. And that's why you said it the other day, but I just kind of put on some music or whatever, and I just dial in, and it sucks sometimes. But once you get over, this is where I go, man. It's like, I don't want distractions. I want to be focused, but it's hard. And people have a hard time with dialing that in. And I just think that is a huge part of training that gets overlooked. And it's, being distracted by whatever, that's fine, but that's our lives, man. I'm trying to think about ways to not be distracted instead of adding them in. And the next thing you know, we're either like going way, way harder or way, way easier or whatever's going on just because of external elements. And to me, it's really all about just getting inside your engine and just feeling that balance and that posture and just being steady with your pressure. And really, that's how you become a better cyclist. I don't know.
It's about efficiency, and it's just, and it's everyone's longest. Unless you have like a total debacle of a day, it's the longest.
Yeah.
And what you know is you want to save it for the most demanding, which is the run. And so it's such a crucial piece. And there's another great way to work on that as well. You talk about, even short course, right? Is you talk about muscular endurance, talking about long course racing is working on your ability and your efficiency when it comes to torque, right? So torque is just so big gear work or torque work or, strength work, low cadence work, whatever you want to call it on the bike, is such an underrated. I mean, sometimes it's overrated, but a lot of people, they just don't do it, right? It's big gear. So big gear work in my opinion, is anything under 60. Now, some people might want to start right at 65 or 70, especially if you have weaker knees or you have knee issues. You don't want to start torquing, the full range and have some knee issues. So it's a good way to get down to it, but start like 60 going down to even 40. Because the things you can do with big gear, right, is you're working the same neuromuscular things you are with your high intensity stuff. That's like, 30 seconds. It's focusing on the full range of motion, the full 360 degrees. And for a lot of people, you can push, right, a much higher output with watts while keeping your heart rate lower. And that's one of the biggest asks, I think, when it comes to athletes this time of year or any time of year, is how much time can we accumulate working at increasing our oxygen uptake or your ability to consume and use oxygen, right? And that's above your aerobic threshold. That's aerobic efficiency. Because when it comes to threshold work and it comes to VO2 max work, there's only a certain amount, like VO2 max block, 4 to 6 weeks. You're gonna need to take a break because you're not going to see any more results from it. And if you need VO2 max, you might be able to do like, 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes a week, or you're going to feel fried. Threshold work can do a bit more of, right? It's not nearly as intensive, but it's still very, very demanding because you can make the intervals so long, right? And your cadence is higher, so your heart rate is higher. So big gear work, especially big gear work in zone 2, zone 3, and even at threshold, is such a great way to still ask your body to recruit the fibers it needs to recruit, to get stronger, right? Because to me, that is the number one factor, right? Aerobic efficiency and strength. And, the same thing goes for, when we talk about running, it's not how fast you go, to literally slow down, right? It's how long you can put off residual muscle soreness and fatigue. And that is a great place for big gear work. And not just, again, big gear work, again, in zone 2 and zone 3, but also big gear work at threshold, starting at 2 minutes, going up to 10 to 12 minutes. If you can hold it, you're getting that work. To me, it's the same benefit as we talk about why hills are so great, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to run nearly as fast going up a hill as you would on flat pavement, but you get way more of the benefit, right? You're having to recruit your posterior chain, you're having to recruit different muscles, different ligaments. Your heart rate goes up quicker, but the kicker is it's so much easier on your body. Right, your heart rate goes up, so that's the opposite piece, right? Bigger work, but it's so much better for you to do it that way versus pounding yourself on the track, and most of the time using just the front part of your leg. So big gear work keeps that heart rate a little bit lower. And just, I think for athletes, just seeing that your heart rate is lower gives you the belief that you can hold it longer. And then it's about strength. It should, a good big gear workout should feel like a gym workout for cycling strength. It might look easy on paper. The first few intervals, might feel like, this isn't that bad. But then as you get moving, this almost everyone's experience when they first are doing was like, that actually got really, really hard towards the end, right? The last few sets, because it just accumulates, right? And especially even if you're doing flat courses, but especially if you're doing courses that are hilly and with lots of pinchers, you need to have that gear. You need to have that deep cycling muscular strength, right? To do that. That's why you see so many of the best cyclists, they all ride in the hills. No one travels to Texas to train unless they're in a heat prep camp. They go somewhere they can ride hills all the time. Hills, hills, hills. Yes, they get elevation, but they're also doing a lot of big gear work. And you're getting that. And also the biggest thing is you're getting that full rotation, the full 360 degrees, because if you have to engage the back part of your stroke, or you're not going to be able to push nearly as much with the opposite side. And I know for you, big gear is your absolute jam compared to all other facets of cycling.
It is. And I mean, it becomes my strength naturally, I think, because I used to mountain bike a lot too. That was the thing, is that that's all about that full pedal stroke, because sometimes you're literally going like 3 miles an hour and you got to just kind of figure out a way. And it's like recruiting all that muscle. And that's exactly what it is. And I think that the big thing is about, the thing I love about the big gear is that you create sort of an efficiency of that torque, and you understand what it feels like to recruit all that muscle. And it's not, again, you train harder than the hill will naturally feel. So you want to be able to get onto that hill and know that you're not absolutely hammering yourself every single time in the race. But one of the great things for me is it teaches me how to relax and get through it. Because a lot of people get into these hills and they see a hill and they start to panic a little bit, I think.
They squirm in their saddle. You see people like rocking so hard left to right, I'm concerned they're going to fall over.
Right. So if you're real used to throwing those big gears around on the trainer all summer and you're just comfortable when things get a little tougher, you can just relax and settle into it and just kind of spin up it, And that's the translation piece that's why I love these, because I need to work a little bit harder on other things. And usually, like I said, it's that zone 2, that aerobic ceiling. That's where I need my work, because I'm pretty strong. I could go out and climb hills probably all day, but then when I have to settle in and kind of stay at a certain pace or effort, that's where I don't have the, that long, that's why like a flat race of Florida or something like that would scare me a little bit more, because I just don't have that posture, that tenacity to sort of stay exactly where I'm at. That's why I like Wisconsin, because it mixes it up for me, and I get in and out of the aero and whatever. And I like that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like when slower turns into faster. That's what I think of the big gear thing. It's sort of like it's almost like an uncomfortable gear. And just getting used to that and knowing that you're not going to usually be in that, but you can handle it if you need to. And that's the other thing that happens a lot on hills, right? As people go into it, they're out in the wrong gear, and the next thing you know, it's like panic city, and they shift and the chains dropping and the whole 9 yards. So if you can just kind of relax and patiently get into that hill and get into your groove, your breathing will be easier. You'll climb easier. And it just all comes together. I mean, hills don't have to be, panic zone. You can just see them and say, oh, there's a hill. And I mean, that's the thing is about, riding a lot of hills and running a lot of hills. We were lucky in a sense, or I should say. I mean, just training in Nashville and starting in Nashville, it was all I saw was hills, running and cycling. So I do think hills are king, and big gear is the, queen, I guess, if you can't get a lot of hills.
Yeah, I mean, it 100% is. You brought up a great point about um, keeping your body stable and in control.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see so many people, because it's the most powerful way and it's the best way to create strength, right? It's like the person you see on the bench that takes the barbell to their chest and pushes it up while keeping their back flat on the bench. And then you got the 17-year-old junior in high school coming in who wants to max out for his bros, and his back is so arched, you think it's going to snap in half.
Yeah.
Right? There's about stability, and see people again on the course that are just like flailing with their bikes left and right. And yes, you might see, the athletes in the Tour de France do that in sprint, right, or climbing. That's because they're producing so much power. The bike is torquing. That's why you see their arms are so muscular. Especially the sprinters, they have to hold on to their bike. But for you want to keep those hips stable and really just grind through those gears. Not grind as in it should hurt your knees or your skeletal structure, but just slowly and methodically. You almost have to think, right? Because the cadence is so low and trying to produce so much power is to every single bit of effort needs to go not into moving your body left and right or to bob in your head. It needs to go into full rotation of the pedal. And I would challenge anyone to do this and encourage them to test this out if you haven't done it before. Is start off with like a zone 3 effort, do maybe 3 times 5 minute intervals with 5 minutes rest, and try to be in that 40 to 60 cadence range. First minute or two will feel a little bit easy, but as you're working like that pedal stroke over, you will find that, man, I don't think I can get below 50. I can't produce the power, but it's such a great way to develop strength, to develop muscular endurance and overall fitness, but also to keep that heart rate low to where, again, you're not like, hey, I gotta do 4x8 at threshold again today. And a lot of times, it's not the fact you can't do it. It's just that the physiological ask that's about to come from it, that it just becomes mentally daunting to do, which is going to make you less likely to be able to complete it.
Yeah, and that it's funny. We used to have the hub, and we'd have people come in there, and we'd always get them started with maybe like a single leg drill. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating how many dead spots are in most people's pedal stroke. And these big gear things are just so good for that because it just teaches you to recruit all that stuff in the full pedal stroke. But I used to do that, man. I told you, I used to ride out at the lab, the airport. I'd do like whole laps with one leg. It was just, and then I'd go the next leg and then I'd combine them. But that's a little bit extreme, but 60 seconds on either leg and then combine them. And then you just start getting that feeling for how a pedal stroke should really feel, To me, that's just one of those little things that I try to start a lot of workouts with, just to kind of get that dialed into my body and get the legs working together, because that's the other thing is most of us have a strong leg, and I find that I end up pushing harder with my strong dominant right leg. And so I always try to, like I said, I used to lead with my left. I just, it's a lifetime pattern that I'm not going to overcome necessarily. But if I can make it a little bit better, where I can make my left leg a little bit more, I guess, ambidextrous or something, but take a little bit more of the load, and it's all about balancing that power, right? I mean, it is.
And
massive.
I think before we move on to our final one of the best things you can do is look at your saddle. See which way it's tilted. Especially if you use like an Adamo or a split nose saddle, everyone leans. And so when you're looking at like, maybe leg length discrepancy, pain on one side versus the other, hamstring tightness versus none on the other, the nose, I noticed this the other day on the bike at home, my split nose on my ISM saddle, the right is like at least a few centimeters lower than the left. It's also where I have knee problems. And it's like, oh, well, if I'm leaning more to the right, then my pedal stroke is actually confined and constricted, right? So my knees got to come out a little bit to make room for the full pedal stroke. So I need to focus on making sure that I'm sitting up the right posture. I'm leaning a little bit to the left more to keep even, to make sure that I'm getting a full pedal stroke, because that's what you see a lot, right? When your people's saddles are too low, their knees splay out because you have to make room to go the full 360. because you can't do it, right? Because of the length of your leg and the length of your crank arm and how high your saddle is. You have to make room for it. So you put all that force down through the medial or the lateral part of your knee. And that's why a lot of people get knee pain or discomfort from cycling. Pay attention to the nose of your saddle, because I guarantee you, especially if it's split nose, one way or the other is tilted. And if it's tilted, guess what? Your hips are tilted. And that's nothing anybody wants. Last and not least, and this might be slightly controversial, but I'm just started a couple athletes doing this. I did a lot last year. You and I talked about it. I think we even talked about it last year, because I heard this, maybe 2 or 3 years ago on a podcast from a coach, 2 coaches actually, that are very well respected. They're mostly in the ITU level, and they were talking about how similar, right, all their squads training was. Like, squad training, so you got, 10 to 15, sometimes 20 athletes from different federations, all competitors, right, doing 80 to 85% of the same training. But having said that, they might say, all right, hey, I want you, to me, it's like the next level of feel. And because I think it gets in the way of most athletes, because athletes love to plan. They love to plan. It has to be exact or it's not going to work, right? And I have to build it in Training Peaks, and it has to be done a specific way. Has to look like this in Trainer Road, has to look this on Zwift, has to look like this in Training Peaks, whatever it is you're using. Is they would just say, hey, Mike, Mike and Tim, you're going out today. We're doing a cycling session. All I really want from you today is around 18 or 20 minutes at threshold. That's it. Okay. Well, how? What do you want? In order to be compliant, what do I need to do? 3 times 6, and then maybe a 2-minute one, or 4 times 5, and both of them. I don't care. Feel it out. See what your body is actually capable of doing today, and then do it. And I think it was so brilliant. I was like, I'm gonna fucking try that with athletes to see how it goes. And the response was fantastic. Now, initially, there's like, wait a minute, is this a trick? Because you give them like, I might start them at, I want 16 to 24 minutes at threshold. Okay, well, how? Like, I don't. You figure it out. Not figure out as in you do your job for me, but as in you feel out what is it, because no coach on the planet, and every coach will admit this, no coach, period, can perfectly predict how an athlete's going to feel the moment they start their workout. You can have an idea, but you have no idea. Too many internal, too many external factors to know. It's impossible. So giving athletes autonomy and flexibility to say, all right, man, I don't think I can do 24 today, but I bet I can do 16. So let's start out with 4 times 4. And you do 4 times 4. Well, guess what? What if that 4th interval, you're like, I feel kind of good today.
Yeah.
Let me do another one. I got no other in me, but you know what? That might just roast me. This is enough. And as the conversation went with these coaches, it was Joe Filio and Paul Souza. They were talking about how, and the host was like, hey, well, what happens, like, when, let's say, because again, Mike and Tim go out and Mike's doing this certain pace, he's going for longer, and Tim's not feeling it, but he wants to go faster and do more. What happens? And he said, the greatest teaching tool and the best way to grow an athlete is to have them learn a lesson themselves. Okay, that was a mistake. I don't want to do that again. Lesson learned. Listen to my body. And so giving an athlete the flexibility, one, on what I call a win range. A win is 16 and a win is 24. You can do a 16-minute interval or 16 1-minute intervals, and it's still a win, right? And you could do 16 all the way up to 24. It's still the win. It's how you felt for that day. And so giving an athlete that ownership to, again, not pre-predict how they feel. And also, a lot of times, like, it's a great way to get athletes to get to know themselves better. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think I can make it for them. But you make it 4 minutes, you're like, oh, well, coach didn't say I have to stop before. Let's see if I can make it 5. Oh, I made it 5. We're not going to make it 6. I made it 6. And then all of a sudden you're going up to 8 minutes. You're like, I didn't think I could hold it that long. take a 4-minute break, right? And it's also a great way to really, as a coach, to get a good view of, because you can give rest, right? So you might go out and do 4 times 6, a threshold with 4 minutes easy. Well, when athletes get but even though most science in most research papers will say anything over 2 minutes is just not necessary. You're not going to get any more, rested. So 2 minutes is a good place to is kind of like the maximum you need. A lot of times anything over that is just accumulating a little bit more time, allowing a little more time for lactic acid to dissipate, but also for the athlete to kind of mentally prepare themselves, right? But I said do it on 2 minutes. You're like, God, that's like no rest. It's like asking somebody to do all out 50s on 5 seconds rest. You're like, why even give me the 5 seconds rest? By the time I stop, look at the clock, I got to go again. But if you give them 20 seconds, like, oh, I got that. I can get my mind wrapped around doing one more. And so that's why you might lengthen it. But it's just a great way to, I get 2 minutes, and that was plenty. So it's also a great way to kind of peek into the voluntary choices an athlete makes by doing more, going harder, doing less, longer rest, shorter rest, and their specific physiology, right, of what they like to do. Because it's also somewhat a personality test. See an athlete admit to say, he's like, I said, I love this thing because I gave him this session. It was like, I think the choice was 18 to 24. Like, I did 24. I love the pain, baby. Bring it to me all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's great. But that's also something I have to watch for as a coach, because they're probably not going to cut it short. So you risk overdoing it, right? Or the athlete that always does the short intervals. They're always going to kind of hedge their bet, right? I think this is fat. Like someone said the other day, this is about as fast as I can run, but if someone was chasing me, I could probably run a lot faster. Right. So it's just a great peak in the mind, but it gives you ownership, it gives you autonomy, and it really does expand the range of win for the day. And the ultimate question, what about the physiological response? If you get in the work, get in the work. Because the ultimate goal is to get the work in. Not to dread the work, not to do it poorly, but to get the work in. And ultimately, you are the only one that knows that. Period. An end of story. And every coach will say that. No one can predict the perfect watt rest interval for any athlete ever.
Yeah, that's good. I think back to how, in a weird way, we did these things by accident. We go to the trace or whatever, there'd be 2 or 3 of us, and we'd go out about 30, 40 miles and come back. And that's when we pace line, and we'd shift, be kind of like, how long can you hold? 2 minutes, drop back, get in the, and we would just do that the whole way back. And to me, that was beautiful. I always knew that was solid work, cause you would be pulling somebody or 2 or 3 people or whatever for 2-3 minutes. Just blistering. It was just something that pushed me out of the zone and made me work. And then you come back in and get that, maybe a little longer recovery. But still, it's so simple for me when we go to the trace a lot of times. I mean, and I think a lot of people, I don't know. I don't know if this was actually the right way to do it or whatever, but we go do long rides and we would work hills, that was just it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we go on long rides and we don't actually do, kind of intervals or that sort of thing a lot of times. But I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, is to work inside of those longer rides too, whatever that looks like. And I mean, yeah, I think it's good to give flexibility, because you can be out there, people feel great, whatever, and let it go a little bit.
Exactly. Let it go. And if they don't, rein it in.
Yeah. I mean,
rein it in, baby. Yeah. It's why it's so like, cycling is the one where the work matters, because, when you look at the energy you produce, or kilojoules, however you want to quantify energy expenditure in work in cycling, or kilojoules, whatever you want to use, distance is irrelevant. Because you can have an athlete do 5 hours and go 100 miles on a perfectly flat, perfect day road, and it crushed it. Or you can go out and do 76 miles, and it might take you 5.5 hours, but you climbed 6,500 feet. right? Watts are higher, effort's higher, right? And you produce more kilojoules. I mean, that's the name of the game. So you can do that so many different ways. It's like a good round of if you track kilojoules, most people fall in like a 3,200 to 3,900 range when you're doing a full distance Ironman. So you can get that any number of ways. And so what I like to do, not chasing that, but what I like to do, and I think you're the same. Maybe you don't track it maybe as much as I do, but when I go out for a ride in the trace, I could care less about distance, and I could care less about time, and I could care less about speed. I want to see how much I can climb. How much elevation can I get for the day? My goal is 4,000. Let's see if I can get 4,000 feet today. You're working hard. You're getting a huge benefit, and there's just a lot of fun things you can do with cycling that you can't do with the other ones.
Yeah, I like that. It's just, for me, that's it. It takes care of itself. You don't have to overthink it too hard. But if you're getting hills, and even in running,
exactly, rolling terrain, hills, let the terrain do the work. That's one of my favorite phrases.
Yeah, that's good. We did that. We were doing, if you don't have a lot of hills or whatever, you can find one and do repeats. We used to do that one. I love that. We still do that at camp.
Yeah, you don't see people doing flat repeats on their bike. I found this great 2-mile stretch of road flat, did some repeats on it.
Well, if you're hammering it, you can.
I mean, you're better off doing a hill repeat.
Yeah, and the goal is to do them in aero, like a 3-mile climb.
Yeah, do it in aero. Really work those muscles.
Yeah.
I missed the trace.
Yeah, I know. It's a love-hate relationship.
It's a love-hate, just like everything. That was it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Hope you took some gleaning pieces of wisdom to apply to your own training, or maybe to answer a few questions. And you got something from it. That's our goal. So it was always enjoyable. We love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. There's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he is available, crushingiron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me, c26coach@gmail.com.
Are those our emails?
This is the last day. Those will be our emails. Yeah. Coming Thursday, brand new emails from Mike and Robbie.
Oh, Mike.
Yep. Get your pen and paper and your sticky note out. New emails coming at you.
Put our first names at c26triathlon.com. I think that works.
That is it. Yeah, just our name where you're so pro at c26triathlon.com. Yep.
Fancy ass pants.
We flipped the shark on that one. Totally flipped the shark.
Yeah. Go check out our sales funnels.
Coming along with the times, man. We're just 20 years behind, but you know what? We get to watch everyone's mistakes on the way, so there's nothing wrong with being a late adopter.
I agree. All right, man. Well, I think I might get back to it.
Have fun, dude. I'll see you Thursday.
All right. See you.
See you.